Dear students, my name is Sir Kumel, and in today's topic, I will teach you independent source and dependent source. So, in today's lecture, I will explain you what are independent sources and how many types of dependent sources are here. First of all, write down the heading independent source. And dependent source. First of all, I would like to teach you the definition of independent sources. Independent source is a source whose value does not depend on any other element in a circuit. Independent source is a source. It may be a voltage source or it may be a current source whose value is independent. Its value is fixed, you can say. Its value is constant. Its value doesn't depend on any other element or a component in the circuit. What are the shapes of independent sources? The shapes of independent sources are circular, or you can say it's a round shape. So it is its identification that the shape is round. This is the round shape of independent source. So whenever you will see the shape in any circuit diagram, in any book, in any handout or lab manual or lecture, you will just understand that it's the symbol of an independent source. Now if I mark the polarity positive negative, i.e. plus minus into this shape like this, I mark the polarity positive and negative to the shape. Now it's an independent voltage source. Independent voltage source, and it has a fixed value which is independent. For example, you can say it has a value of 5 volt. This 5 volt doesn't depend on any other element or component in the same circuit where it is connected as a source. Now if I mark arrow in the shape like this, the arrow in the shape represents an independent current source. So now it's an independent current source. Arrow always represents current because it's the symbol of current shows the direction of current. So what's the identification of independent source? Independent source always have a round shape, and if you see the polarity, i.e. plus minus into the shape, it's an independent voltage source, and if there is an arrow, then it means it's an independent current source. Now I would like to write down the definition of dependent source. So come on the next page. Dependent source. Dependent source is a source whose value depends on other circuit elements. Whether it's a dependent voltage source or it's a dependent current source, its value will depend on other circuit elements like resistor. That's why it is also called a control source. Dependent source is also called a control source. Why it is called control source? Because its value is depending on other circuit elements. So the elements on which its value actually depends, it's controlling it. That's why it's also called a control source. Dependent source also has two types: dependent voltage source and dependent current source. First of all, you have to see the shape of dependent source. The shape of the dependent source is diamond shape. Remember the short tip to memorize it: D for diamond, D for dependent, D for diamond, D for dependent. So whenever you will see the diamond shape in any circuit diagram, in lecture, in handouts, in books, so you will understand that the shape is diamond, then it means it's a symbol of dependent source. Now if I mark the polarity positive negative into the shape, obviously it's a dependent voltage source, because polarity plus minus always represents the voltage. But if I mark the arrow into the shape, it's dependent current source, because arrow always represents the current, the direction of current. Now what you have to understand is that dependent voltage source further has two types and dependent current source further has two types. Now I will teach you how many types of dependent voltage source are there. Write down the heading: dependent voltage source. Dependent voltage source has two types. The first type is voltage controlled voltage source. Voltage controlled voltage source, its short form is VCVS. Its short form is VCVS, voltage controlled voltage source. focus on the word voltage control. As I have already told you, the value of the dependent source depends on other circuit elements. So the voltage of the dependent voltage source will depend on other circuit elements. Here the word voltage control means that the voltage of this dependent voltage source depends onto the voltage of another circuit element. Like if I take an example of a resistor, R, and the voltage across it, for example, say V is equal to 3 volt. This resistor is connected in the same circuit where VCVS, voltage controlled voltage source, is connected, and the voltage of VCVS, voltage controlled voltage source, is depending on this resistor. So what will the value of VCVS? This is the shape of the dependent voltage source. If I say, for example, the value of this VCVS is 2V watt. For example, you can take another value as you wish. I am taking right now 2V volt. So you can see 2V volt is the value of this dependent voltage source. What is this V? This V is actually the voltage of this resistor, which is 3 volt. So you have to put this 3 volt here, and it will be multiplied by 2. 2 multiplied by 3 is equal to 6 volt. So what's the value of this VCVS? The value is 6 volt. It is a dependent voltage source of 6 volt. You understand now why it's called voltage control? Because it is controlled by the voltage of this resistor. It is depending onto the voltage of this resistor. That's why the word is voltage control. Okay. Now the other type is current controlled voltage source. Current control voltage source. Current control voltage source. Current control voltage source is a dependent voltage source, and the word current control is showing that the voltage of this dependent voltage source depends onto the current of the circuit element. Again, take an example of a resistor. R, and the current flowing through it is I is equal to, for example, say 2 ampere. I is equal to 2 ampere. Now this 2 ampere current of the resistor is controlling CCVS. Its short form is CCVS, current control voltage source. Now I will draw the symbol of CCVS. Its value is, for example, say 4I volt. 4I volt. 4I volt is the value of this CCVS, current control voltage source. What is this I? This I is actually the current flowing through this resistor, which is 2 ampere. So we have to put 2 ampere here, and it will be multiplied by 4. 4 multiplied by 2 is equal to 8 volt. So the actual value of this CCVS, current controlled voltage source, is 8 volt. You understand why its name is current controlled? Because this dependent voltage source is controlled by the current of the resistor. In VCVS, the voltage source was controlled by the voltage across the resistor. But in CCVS, the voltage source is controlled by the current of the resistor. That's why the word is current control in the heading. Okay? So these are the two types of dependent voltage source. Now there are two types of dependent current source as well. So write down the heading: dependent current source. The first type of dependent current source is VCCS, voltage control current source. Voltage controlled current source, VCCS, short form is VCCS. So it's a dependent current source, but it is voltage controlled. What does it mean, voltage controlled? Again, take an example of a resistor. And the voltage across it is V is equal to, for example, say 4 volt. This 4 volt voltage of the resistor is controlling this dependent current source. That's why the name is voltage control. Now I am drawing the symbol of VCCS, voltage controlled current source. And for example, say its value is 3 V ampere. Ampere is the unit of current and the value is 3 V ampere. What is this V? This V is the voltage across the resistor, 4 volt. So you have to multiply 4 with 3. 3 multiplied by 4 is equal to 12. So the value of VCVS, VCCS, voltage controlled current source, is 12 ampere. The value is 12 ampere. So you understand how the value of this dependent current source depends on the resistor and on the voltage across the resistor. So the voltage across the resistor is actually controlling this dependent current source. That's why its name is voltage control. Now the second type is current controlled current source. Short form is CCCS. Current controlled current source, CCCS. It depends on the current flowing through the resistor. Again, take an example of the resistor. R is the symbol, current flowing through it is small I, and small I is equal to, for example, say 3 amperes. Now draw the symbol of dependent current source, and its value is, for example, say 2I ampere. 2I ampere is the value. What is this I? This I is actually the current flowing through this resistor, which is 3 ampere. So you have to multiply this 3 by 2 with 2. 2 3 the 6. So the actual value of this dependent current source is 6 ampere. Why it's called current controlled current source, CCCS? Because this dependent current source is controlled by the current flowing through the resistor. The topic ends here. Thank you very much for the watching.